broadcasting to viewers in Liberia and across the globe. Hello and welcome to News Today on KMTV. My name is Anthony Kukui. Wherever you're watching us from, we say thanks for joining our news broadcast tonight. Let's take a look at stories making headlines. Ministry of Labor launches National Action Plan on the elimination of child labor. Collaborating political parties term as grave threat to Liberia's democracy, the closure of Roots FM by national government. And as Liberia joined the globe in observance of the International Day of the Girl Child, young women and girls in Liberia admonished to consider self-esteem in their strive for excellence. Welcome to KMTV News once again. We begin at the Ministry of Labor, where the ministry on Friday launched its National Action Plan on the elimination of the worst form of child labor. The plan, according to the ministry, is meant to address the creeping and increasing wave of child labor activities across the country. Serving as keynote speaker at the program was Senator Matthew Jade of Sano County, who said the impact of child labor on fundamental rights relative to the development in this government is critical to the need of the country and needs to be addressed with immediate effect.
There are concerns about the impact of child labor on fundamental rights as related to national development to this government. These concerns derive from harmful effects of hazardous work that appeal not only to the psychological, but also the development of the child. Child labor manifests itself in various forms and in all of the sectors to include domestic service, commercial agriculture, fishing, mining, rock crushing, street selling, and prostitution, which is the high form or the highest form of child labor, and very much degrading. The International Labour Organization ILO conventions on minimum age, Convention 138, and the worst form of child labor, Convention 182, provide the framework for national law to prescribe the national age for admission to employment. These conventions are yet to be ratified so that they can also be domesticated. Child labor should not be confused with youth employment. As from the minimum working age, young people should be able to engage in decent work but still need protection from hazardous work and other forms of child labor. Child labor is an inhumane form of exploitation that is a violation of fundamental human rights. It is recognized and defined by international community. It is also declared or a declared policy of the international community and of almost all governments to abolish child labor.
We're also speaking at the program was Deputy Labor Minister Phil Dixon, who pointed out that the government, through the Ministry of Labor, is now taking action to help arrest the situation of child labor.
We want to point out that from the position of the Ministry of Labor, one key word here is action. We do not intend to sit still while the rights of children are being violated. Child labor has several negative implications. It leads to reduction in educational attainment, which over time is likely to lead to a less advantageous employment situation for a child and therefore contribute to poverty in adulthood. Children in employment are vulnerable to abuse, and might end up getting teenage pregnancies from their employers and gain souvenirs of an experience that they would have actually desired to avoid. Additionally, what it takes to stop child labor is not beyond us. It is not something that requires space technology. It is simply parents agreeing to be parents and allowing children to be children. If we choose to be parents collectively, it shouldn't be too difficult for us. Consequently, the Ministry of Labor believes that parents who are breadwinners will capture this message and be willing to give support. We look forward to organizations enabling parents to grow in the government of Liberia through all its relevant line ministries and agencies.
We're also speaking at the program. The senior officer at the U.S. Embassy near Monrovia stressed that children are globally most often vulnerable to society, and it is imperative to protect their fundamental rights. Madam Brookie praised national government for showing improvement in protecting children in Liberia, but noted that more still needs to be done.
Children are the most vulnerable members of society, and it is imperative that we do everything in our power to protect them from harm. While Liberia has shown great improvement in its efforts to protect children, there is still more work to be done. I encourage the government of Liberia to demonstrate increasing efforts in its fight against child labor now that the National Action Plan has been finalized, and I encourage the government to provide sufficient funding to meet the goals of the National Action Plan. I know it is sometimes difficult, but I also want to encourage the government to investigate and prosecute even more cases. The U.S. Embassy stands ready to work alongside the government of Liberia to tackle these challenges. Thank you again for all your support and partnership on this issue. Child labor is a problem that affects many Liberians and one we can all work together to solve.
The managing attorney of CMB Law Group, Charlene Bronskin, has admonished young women and girls to consider self-restraint in their strive for excellence. Speaking at the International Day of a Girl Child celebration organized by Youth for Change in Monrovia, the president of the Bronskin Family Foundation said young women and girls should keep focused in pursuing their respective dreams. According to Ms. Bronskin, women are vital in societal growth and must work to explore their potentials.
Character is who you are when nobody is watching. What you made out of. Young women, we are in a country where the men have the power. And when men have power, they have the money. And everybody needs money to survive. Isn't that true? Yes. So sometimes as women, because of this country we live in and this system, we tend to compromise ourselves. Some of you are in this room. Loving to men, you ain't supposed to be loving to. Some of y'all in this room are being sexually abused by men. Every human being is tempted. Every human being finds themselves in situations where you have to decide between today and tomorrow. And I say to you, decide tomorrow. Sometimes we make decisions just for today that will affect us in the long run. Young women, know your worth, know your value, know your value. And all of these older men, and it is so clear in our country, they're just using you. What do you have to do today? Study hard. Focus on what is right. Don't rush your life. You have far way to go.
Meanwhile, some participants at the program have been giving their own views on the way in which that's the view on the importance of girls and the way in which they can attack societal needs.
When I hear you not speaking anything, the act of somebody wanting to hear you is the act of you even starting to speak something for people to hear. So as we celebrate the International Day of the Girl Child today, let's remember to not keep them to ourselves. Let's remember to share our problems. One thing to all of the ladies in here, we keep talking about wanting a space. International Day of the Girl Child is saying you can give that little girl a space, doesn't matter her size. And the reason why you're giving her a space because you trust her potential that she can do a certain thing. And the ability she has is the ability that can move this chair from there to there. That's the concept we should have only. And unstoppable, we don't know what unstoppable is. It means when a lady is moving, there's nobody who can stop her. Because maybe she's a bulldozer. So this is the National Day of the Girl Child. Let's remember to keep girls in mind.
Girl Force, unscripted and unstoppable. I actually like this theme because I'm one of the persons who subscribe to this view that the world is becoming more aware of how important it is for girls to participate, to be involved. And I was told to speak on the topic, the importance of girls' involvement. In social work, I'm a student of social work. In social work, we have a concept of the client's self-involvement, of getting a person involved in the process of helping them solve their problems. And I think basically that is where the importance of having girls involved comes in. Because if only the male gender is involved in solving the problems of this world, it is one-sided. But when you get women involved as well, it's not to push the men away, but it's so that we work together to make sure that our world is better. It creates the understanding for us to know that there are bigger possibilities. That a woman can be a mother in the home, can take care of her children, can clean up, and she can also be a leader.
An exceptional girl is someone who stands out in crowds. She causes people to love her, and more girls who like to use her as their role model. Low self-esteem is one of the biggest problems we are faced with in our today's society. So we should learn how to compliment others. As an exceptional girl, you should also learn to take initiative.
You are watching News Today, half an hour news presentation that brings you up to date with unfolding in Liberia. My name is Anthony Kukwe on this weekend's presentation. Still ahead of us, collaborating political parties term as grave threat to Liberia's democracy, the closure of Roots FM by national government. This plus many more developments all coming up right after this break. Welcome back and thanks for rejoining. The Executive Director of Messenger of Peace Liberia, Gwendolyn Myers, says the role of young people in sustaining the peace in the nation is paramount and therefore called on state actors to promote the active involvement of youth in peace process within the country. Speaking in an exclusive interview of KMTV, Ms. Myers used the occasion to encourage young people of the country to work harder in raising the flag of the country.
What we do in terms of even from the messengers of peace and as well from the global perspective of the whole Youth for Peace campaign, as we continue to run all of the different advocacy programs across the entire globe. I'll basically say coming now to speak to Liberia context and what is also related to Africa as well. I mean, young people have a major role to play in sustaining peace. If young people accept peace in any nation, that peace is actually going to be accepted. If the young people reject peace, it's going to be rejected. And that's what is very important with all these different protocols and declarations that we have, that we try to see how much we make them to be really in action, meaning to have tangible action, so that young people can know what it is meaningfully to be engaged. So in terms of the 5 pillars of the resolution, what is actively participating in all, in terms of decision making and everything that will benefit the well-being of young people. We look at partnership, local governments, national governments, international community will definitely need to partner with young people to make sure that the voices of young people respected, and not just respected, but young people will kind of what we call leaving no one behind. So leaving no one behind, but with young people active and meaningful participation. We also look at the issue of what we call disengagement and reintegration. So most of our colleagues who one way or the other participated in civil war, it's also a time for us to kind of rebrand the image of the young people. We continue to say this, so also creating opportunities where they can feel accepted and part of everything that we do, whether in our day-to-day activities and interactions.
To this development now, collaborating political parties have termed as grave threat to Liberia's democracy the closure of Roots FM by national government. Speaking at the news conference Friday, the spokesperson of the CPP, Women Paid, condemned the action, noting that it is a major violation of the people's fundamental constitutional right to freedom of speech and expression. Mr. Paid warned national government to desist the abuse of power and devote energy towards fixing the country's broken economy. The CPP used the occasion to call on the international community to intervene in what they observe to be the worsening situation in Liberia. Moreover, the political institution urged civil society organizations in Liberia to generate the courage to confront what they term as alleged growing oppression being unleashed upon the Liberian people. In the strong tone, Mr. Pay at the same time demanded the national government to immediately reopen Roots FM, threatening to mobilize Liberians to stand up and stop the claimed creeping dictatorship in its track before it's too late. Meanwhile, Solicitor General Consular Serena Cephas has termed Roots FM as a criminal enterprise and explained why the decision was taken by national government. According to him, Roots FM was operating illegally, a violation of the 2015 Telecommunication Act of Liberia.
And this morning, the sheriff, accompanied by the police, went to the premises of FM 102.7 to carry out the court order. So today's exercise was done in line with section 11.2G of the Criminal Procedure Law, that's Title 2 Liberian Code of Law revised. We want to be categorical that in a democracy, you need legitimate and licensed institution to operate. This registration just means, apart from operating illegally, they were engaged in conduct of inciting, rioting, and violence. FM 102.7 specifically was engaged in broadcasting hate messages against people, against individuals, against peaceful Liberian citizens, and other forms of extortion and blackmail. This was, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the government of Liberia, a sheer public nuisance, disorderly conduct, and we could no longer condone a radio station that is now licensed, that is operating illegally to create or become an enterprise for extortion, blackmail, and name calling.
A local civil society group, the Institute for Research and Democratic Development, ARED, says it is troubled by the prolonged detention of accused persons without trial, specifically at some magisterial and circuit courts in the country. At the news conference Thursday, ARED project manager Bob Johnson considered the continued delay to proceed with speedy trial of accused persons in pre-trial detention as deliberate and gross violation of their basic human rights.
During the month under review, September 1 to 30, 2019, ARED monitor deployed a selected police station, magistrate, and circuit courts in Vajaman City, Lofa County, Zuetu City, Branchida County, and part of Mosoraro County had documented huge number of pre-trial cases on the respective court dockets, some of which are dated back as far back as 2008. With these unfolding human rights violation, ARED is troubled with the prolonged detention of accused persons without trial, especially as some magisterial and circuit courts. ARED consider the continued delay to proceed with speedy trial of accused persons in pretrial detention as willful and gross violation of their basic right. Number of cases on court dockets. Natural are A. Criminal Code A has 35 cases on the docket and has 29 pretrial detainees. Criminal Code B, 30 cases and 22 pretrial detainees. 10 Judicial Circuit Court, Lofa County, 50 cases and 50 pretrial detainees. 7 Judicial Circuit, Grand Jida County, 10 civil cases, 12 criminal cases, 5 pretrial detainees on the Circuit Court docket. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, ARED is pleased to commend the Moral City Code for its outstanding performance in the administration of justice during the month under review. Our monitor report revealed that 70 cases recorded on the court bulletin for the period under review were held and pending ruling. The Arlington Magisterial Court have been without a sound magistrate for nearly 2 years.
And over now to sports. The amputee national team of Liberia today finished as third place winners in the 5th edition of the Africa Cup of Nations for amputee football in Angola after defeating Tanzania 2-1. Liberia conceded an early goal in the first half, but striker Matthew Joe, age 22, came from behind to help Liberia by scoring two goals to help Liberia secure the 2-1 win over Tanzania. Liberia have so far won the competition 3 times out of 5 editions and finishing third in this edition. World champions Angola defeated Nigeria by a goal to 0 to win this year's edition of the Africa Cup of Nations for amputee football. And as well, the Liberia national team have arrived in Chad for the second leg of the ongoing 2021 Africa Cup of Nations qualifier preliminaries. Liberia defeated Chad 1-0 on Wednesday at the Samarkando Sports Complex, with Madisha-based striker Pa Sherman scoring the lone goal. Meanwhile, striker William Jebo has pulled out of the squad for what he called illness, contrary to the Liberia Football Association's release that the striker pulled out of the team because he said he was disrespected by head coach Peter Butler. Well, with that sporting development, that's how we go home on this weekend's edition of KMTV News Today. But before we go, let's take a look at stories that make the headlines. Ministry of Labor launches National Action Plan on the elimination of worst form of child labor. Collaborating political parties term as grave threat to Liberia's democracy. The closure of Roots FM by national government. And Liberia's join the globe in observance of International Day of the Girl Child, as young women in Liberia are admonished to consider self-esteem in their strive for excellence. And in sports, the national amputee team of Liberia today emerged as third place winners of the 5th edition of the Africa Cup of Nations for amputee football. We say many thanks to you for always joining our news broadcast from across the globe. On behalf of the entire news team here, my name is Anthony Kuku. You can also visit our website at www.kmtvliberia.com for more news and information. Until we're back here on Monday with more news and developments, do have yourself a pleasant weekend.